The health concerns were a heated issue. People were feeling ill, and though public health officials pointed out that this was the flu season, the press focused on the coincidence of the blowout and the apparent increase in illness. There are 3,495 doctors in Alberta, of which 115 are practicing obstetricians. The press found one who thought expectant mothers should leave the province and quoted him repeatedly. Psychologists offered their opinions, pointing out that people can become ill just through fearing that they have been exposed to a health hazard. You can imagine the pressures put on the Public Affairs Department of Amoco. Don Smith.
There is a direct correlation between what people experienced with their noses and the resulting level of concern. Hydrogen sulfide at very, very low concentrations has a very strong and very unpleasant odor. There also can be a strong correlation between what people are told about possible health problems and their perception of the likely cause of any problems they might be experiencing and their overall level of concern and worry about those problems. Media reporting after the November 16th fatal accident speculated quite extensively on the possible long-term health effects of well site emissions. Until that point in time, we at Amoco Canada had issued news releases only when there was progress to report on well control operations at the site, and the media was used as the most direct and fastest route to the general public. We found that we couldn't provide enough reassuring information to the general public, and despite additional reassuring statements from governments and medical authorities, no clear direction or guidance for the general public was to be found in media reports. For example, extensive definitive article on hydrogen sulfide has still yet to be carried by an Alberta media outlet. Sufficient care during the blowout was not taken to distinguish between the environmental regulations for hydrogen sulfide emissions and the public health regulations. Sufficient care was not taken to distinguish between the evacuation levels as being levels related to public health and to point out that these levels were not lethal levels. The evacuation levels were designed specifically to ensure that people were removed from an affected area long before hydrogen sulfide concentrations were ever a threat to public health.
The first fire had burned down into the muskeg, and though the site was monitored with infrared photography from the air, a hot spot or underground smoldering escaped detection. This hot spot flared up on the afternoon of November 25th. The fire began on the edge of the lease, burning its way back across the condensate-soaked ground towards the well. The well caught fire, and though no one was injured, a considerable amount of equipment was destroyed.
Once the crane and other debris from the second fire had been cleared away, it was found that the hot fire had damaged the service casing. This damage meant a longer repair than was originally anticipated, and since the wind conditions were still calm, a long period of H2S emission was likely. Due to the annoyance caused to the public by the smell and the danger to well site crews caused by the high concentrations of H2S, it was decided to attempt to cap the well without extinguishing the fire. This method was not considered initially because it is an extremely difficult and hazardous procedure and only been successfully completed 5 or 6 times previously on much smaller wells. Further, it was felt that a conventional capping approach had a good chance of success.
Amoco discussed this new alternative fully with Joe Bowden.
The reason we left, and this was something that was worked out with Amoco as far as bringing boots and coots up. As far as putting it out on fire, I wasn't going to put this one out on fire at all. We were going to go about it and do it just like we had before, shoot it out, strip on it, and get it over with.
Boots Hansen and his crew arrived on site December 2nd and began work immediately. As was the case throughout the blowout, the purchasing group of Amoco's task force continued to gather necessary material or equipment no matter where they had to go for it or what it cost. Often, Amoco sent its own planes to avoid delays.
The aviation section ensured that both company aircraft were available on a 24-hour-a-day basis throughout the blowout to transport personnel and essential equipment. During that time, the Twin Otter landed at Drayton Valley 48 times. The Hawker Siddeley landed there 18 times. One of the more demanding schedules happened on October the 22nd. The aircraft left Calgary for Tuktoyaktuk on the Arctic coast, picked up some special equipment and transported it to Drayton Valley. A second crew immediately left for Toronto, where it met Air Canada flight from Newfoundland transporting equipment. This equipment was then taken to Drayton Valley. By using the two crew during a 38-hour time period, the aircraft was airborne over 27 hours.
Because the casing was damaged by the second fire, Boots' first order of business was to cut off the wellhead. And since the well was burning, this operation had to be done from quite a distance, as Boots Hansen himself explains.
So what we did, we just put a cable around it on two pulling units and about 16,000 foot of cable and just sawed it off. Spooled one of them up and then let off on the other one and just saw the whole thing off.
This step took 5 days. Then, to enable the cats to excavate around the wellhead, the intense heat of the flaming gas had to be reduced.
Well, that's when we started putting a big stack on it to pipe it way up in the air so the dozers could dig around the bottom of it. We dug a trench in and out, actually right across the location, about 10 foot deep.
The trench was dug to expose the upper 3 meters of the casing. After removal of some 7,000 cubic meters of dirt, the crews were able to erect heat shields under the fire. These shields are heavy sheets of corrugated metal. They deflect the radiant heat waves and, in effect, provide a relatively protected area. The wellhead casing is actually composed of 3 pipes, one inside the other. Boots had to cut away the outside 2 in order to attach to the inner pipe a new casing bowl, which would mate with or fit the blowout preventer.
Being the well was burning, it was real, instead of having cutters or compressed air cutters like we usually use, well, we just used torches to cut all the strings of pipe, staged them down. The 95H pipe was left up high, and we came down 4 feet and cut the 13 3/8 off. And that is really the secret in, I'll say the secret, this is the way to do these wells while they're burning.
When this was done, a new bowl was lifted into the fire and onto the interior casing. There it was welded into place. This bowl was flanged to mate with the blowout preventers.